Okay, folks, there will be plenty of time for us to chat throughout the evening, but I just want to say a warm welcome to New South Wales Parliament House for the 2022 Tony Coote AM Memorial Lecture. It has been 3 years since I stood in this exact spot for this exact same role, and I'm absolutely delighted to be back here. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Stephanie Brantz. I'm a broadcaster and very firm friend of the Mulloon Institute, and I'm delighted to be here this evening. We are on Gadigal land, and it's with great pleasure that I introduce Alan Murray, Chair of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, up to the microphone to do Welcome to Country. Alan, welcome to you. Thank you.
Good evening, how are you? Come on, you can do better than that. Normally I say that to open up the dialogue to say to our creator, Biami, to let people know that because of him or she, it's because of that relationship to our creator is to make sure that our creator understands who you are and so forth, because in our spirits, in our heart, is to make sure you are accepted onto this land. Not only as strangers, but friends. Now, how can I say that you're friends until I do the Welcome to Country? But normally we would do a smoking ceremony. In the smoking ceremony will allow us passage to this land, given that a lot of people here have probably traversed the great New South Wales, and also probably interstate as well, about the different parts, every step that you take or every step that you walk on New South Wales and Victoria and Australia, it's Aboriginal land. If I say our catch cry, will you join me towards the end? And that is, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And with that, I get the privilege of being doing a lot of Welcome to Country. Smoking ceremony is part of that. Normally we have a fire, and then light the smoke, and we greet you into our lands. The other principles about smoke is that when it's lit in someone's estate, so perhaps the Wiradjuri people of Dubbo or Wagga Wagga, they will light a smoke to introduce other clans to come into the area. Here it's quite different. This is where it all started. This is where colonisation started. And when them tall ships came through Sydney Harbour, all our clans here in the Sydney Harbour said, invaders are coming into this country, and they lit the smoke to warn other clans along the Sydney Harbour, along the eastern coast of Australia, all the way out to Parramatta and also up to the Blue Mountains. Here, if you look at Domain itself, the park behind you, that was an Aboriginal village then. And because Sydney is so abundantly important to the invaders that came to this country, they removed that village. And I want to pay respects to them, and I want to pay respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. By default, my land council and its board, we are custodians of 23 clans. Of the 26 clans that lived in the Sydney area. 23 clans, there are no descendants of those people. So in honour of them, we make sure their history is noted. All their sacred sites, their sites, are kept to make sure that our future generation will understand that this is their land. And how can I say this in the strangers' room? If you want to be strangers, or we want to be friends. If you want to understand our legacy, because we've been here for 40,000 years, 60,000 years, 120,000 years, no comparison to what happened in the last 230 years. If you understand our knowledge about fire burning, how to live off the land, keep our resources going, and continue to live under the threat that we were going to be wiped out as a race, as the oldest race in the world. Please keep this in mind. So I want to say this. Welcome to Gadigal land, Aboriginal land. I want to also pay respects to their elders, past and present. I normally, when I'm over North Sydney, acknowledging the Camaragical people, I would say, because there are no direct descendants, you know what I say? I welcome all Australians to this land. But please show respect and responsibility of the past. With that, I'll say this: always was, always will be. Thank you very much.
Alan, thank you very much. And as we gather to talk about regeneration of the land, it's a pertinent message that you have, and we feel privileged to have you speaking to us this evening. I know the Honourable Gary Nann wants to say his own thank you, but thank you so much, Alan Murray. Please. Folks, you will see your entree in front of you, and I just want to tell you that an old tradition of Tony Coote's at the start of a meal was for him to express gratitude for the food, be that for the chicken or lamb providing what was to be eaten, the farmer who grew the vegetables, and so on and so forth. And it was suggested that tonight it might be a wonderful idea to continue that tradition. So to do so, I'd like to invite an old friend of Tony's, Kathy Harris, to come up and give that thanks. Kathy. Hope someone gave you the research on the menu, Kathy. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Yes, funnily enough, it was also a tradition in our family to always have a gratitude. We used to make a point that we'd have 2 minutes of gratitude. You had to say 3 things that you were grateful for. But I have to tell you, this is a bit of a reverse trap. The trap in when we had it was anybody who sat at our table that hadn't been at the table before, we used to ask them, they had to say their 3 things. So I did it to Peter Howard the other night. And the reverse trap is how he said, now you've got to do it in front of 200 people. You only had 10 to do it in front of Peter. So I thought about it, and I thought, what am I grateful for? And the first thing you have to think about is here we are sitting in Parliament House. We live in this amazing democracy. I know sometimes our politicians all fight, but when you have a think about what's happening right now in the world, in Europe, your heart just breaks. So I'm so thankful that we live in this wonderful democracy called Australia. And I'm so thankful to our politicians of both sides that they put themselves out there every day and get bashed by all of us, I know. But I'm grateful that we're there, and I think of our friends in Ukraine and in Europe and in Poland and what's going on. So that's my first thing that I'm grateful for. My second thing is, funnily enough, the farmers. You can't, the last few years, when you think about when you sit down at your meal and you see your carrots or your potatoes or your beautiful piece of beef or your beautiful piece of chicken or whatever it is, and you think what farmers have been through drought, and then the fires, and now the floods, and they keep going, and they're resilient, and they're trying harder, and they get people like Mulloon Creek involved to make it better and better. So my gratitude, I mean, we have a business that runs on it, so thank you farmers, we love you, and please, let's try and help more and more and more, and let's not complain about if they're a bit dear this week, because can you imagine what it's been like for farmers trying to get truck drivers to send things down to the markets? Brisbane markets has been totally flooded, it's been chaos, so thank you to our farmers. And the third thing I'd like to pay gratitude to Australians, Indigenous people, for keeping this land in such a way and looking after it and fostering it for 40,000 years. I'm so grateful, and I continue to be grateful, learning little things that we do about our own land. David and I have got a property up in the Blue Mountains, and we learn so much things from our Indigenous people in the area. So deep gratitude to you guys for teaching us so much, and we've got so much more to learn, and we've got to start. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Kathy, that was lovely. Thank you. I would have liked a review on Peter's performance at your dinner, but we might have to wait till later to hear that. Folks, it's been more than a decade since Tony Coote AM founded the Mulloon Institute with his wife Tony for the purpose of expanding research into regenerative agriculture and repair of our degraded landscapes. Well, today, the Mulloon Institute is the leader in research, in education and advocacy for rehydrating that same Australian landscape. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the man who will deliver tonight's Tony Coote Memorial Lecture, the Honourable Shane Stone, ACQC. Wonderful to have you, Shane. Looking forward to hearing your words a little later. Also, a warm welcome to the New South Wales Minister for Agriculture, the Honourable Dougal Saunders, and also to Nicole Overall, MP, the member for Monero, I think officially as of yesterday, so congratulations on that and wonderful to have you here. Of course, especially wonderful because the Mulloon Institute is in Monero, so that's please hang around. There's plenty of people that want to chat. And I'd also like to say thank you, of course, to our sponsors, the National Recovery and Resilience Agency, NRA, to Low Wines and to Harris Farm Markets. Thank you so much for your support. Could we hear a round of applause, show our gratitude to them for their support. Now, many of you will be aware that the Mulloon Institute is a charity with fully tax deductibility status, and while tonight we aren't actually fundraising, I would like to acknowledge the many people in this room that have shown their support, and I encourage all of you to support the work as it expands across the country. MulloonInstitute.org, you will see it on the back of your program, and please, if you can support, everything is very gratefully received. Now, we did have a welcome to country, and now it's time to have an official welcome on behalf of the Mulloon Institute. To do so, would you put your hands together, please, for Chairman, the Honourable Gary Nan, AO.
Thanks, Stephanie, and please, I'm happy for you to sort of nibble away at your entree as well if you've been sitting there looking at it and thinking I'll have a bite of that. But good evening, everyone, and Alan, I know, had to go, but I thank him for the welcome to country, and I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. So, on behalf of my fellow directors of the Institute, welcome here tonight. Thank you for all being here tonight for the third Tony Coote Memorial Lecture. We instigated this yearly event in 2019 after our founders, Tony and Tony, or TJ as we knew her, passed away in 2018. As we're here in Parliament House, I also want to acknowledge and welcome the New South Wales Minister for Agriculture, Dougal Saunders, and I know Dougal's hasn't been in the job all that long, but from the media that I've seen around the countryside, he's obviously hit the ground running. And the Mulloon's now local member, Nicole Overall, as of yesterday, that sworn in, and her first speech yesterday afternoon. Congratulations and welcome. And I'd also like to acknowledge a former member member and minister in this place, Michael Yabsley, who Michael was a great friend of Tony's and a great supporter of the work that we're doing, and he's here tonight as well. So welcome, Michael. It's also wonderful to have Tony Coote's sister, Margie Alsop, here, along with her son and Tony's nephew, Simon. Great that you've been able to be part of this event as well. Our special guest tonight will be Shane Stone, who will be introduced later, but Coordinator General of the National Recovery and Resilience Agency. Shane and I have known each other 35 years, I think it is, isn't it, Shane? Something like that, in various forms over that period. And knowing that Shane grew up in regional Victoria, lived in Alice Springs and Darwin, he well and truly understands the challenges that communities in rural, remote and regional Australia face each day. So when we had the 2019, I think it was, big northwest Queensland floods, I wasn't surprised when he was tapped to lead the recovery from that particular disaster. But then we had the disastrous drought, and then we had the disastrous bushfires, and then we had the disastrous floods, and more floods. Not to mention COVID. Many people don't know, I think that his agency is handling a lot of the payments around COVID as well. So he certainly took on a lot in that respect. And so when I asked him last year if he'd been up to Queensland and seen some of our work in that area, and also down on our farms. So when I asked him last year if he would deliver this year's, when it was supposed to be in September last year, the Tony Coote Memorial Lecture, he kindly agreed, but we had to postpone it through COVID. And I mean, I didn't think that we would now be here immediately after yet another major disastrous flood situation. So it's great, Shane, that you are here tonight. Tony Coote demonstrated great vision when he established the Mulloon Institute back in 2011. Now, he'd witnessed firsthand just how landscape repair and rehydration not only repaired a degraded environment, it gave properties resilience to drought, flood and bushfire, it improved water quality and quantity, it increased habitat for endangered species, and it improved agricultural productivity. So he wondered why this work wasn't being taken up all over the country, and he set about making it happen. Well, sadly, that endeavour was cut short when we lost him in 2018, but he certainly left the nation a legacy by the Institute, by bequeathing the farms to the Institute, so this work could continue, and we'll learn more about that from our CEO, Carolyn Hall, shortly. The first Tony Coote Memorial Lecture in 2019 was delivered by former Governor-General and National Soil Advocate and patron of the Mulloon Institute, Michael Jeffrey. Sadly, we lost Michael in late 2020, but another wonderful legacy he left behind for the advocacy work that he did for improving soil health. And his replacement in that role, Penny Wensley, unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. She really wanted to be, but Sue Bestow from the office is here, which is great. The second lecture in 2020 was delivered virtually from Zimbabwe by Alan Savory, the international guru for holistic management, a key element of achieving improved agricultural land and environmental repair. And so tonight, lecture the third by Shane, which will be after our main course tonight. As Stephanie said earlier, our three sponsors, so I want to add my thanks to those three sponsors, the NRRA for being a sponsor, as well as delivering the guest speaker. Low Wines, David and Kim Lowe, thank you so much for your support as well for the event. Great wines for everybody to look at, taste, and then go and buy some more when you leave here. And thirdly, Harris Farm Markets. Harris Farm Markets, David and Kathy Harris and Angus. Has Angus got here yet? He has. He has snuck in. One of the joint CEOs from Harris Farm Markets, thank you for the great support. They're a great client of our farms, and we're long-time friends of Tony and wonderful support. I'd now like to invite our CEO, Carolyn Hall, to come forward to take us through the next part of the evening. But on behalf of the Mulloon Institute, thank you all once again for being part of this, what hopefully will be, I'm sure it will be, a great event. Thank you.
Everybody else has jumped up on the stage. I think I'll use the stairs. Good evening, everyone. I want to join with Gary in welcoming you to the Tony Coote AM Memorial Dinner and Lecture this evening. We couldn't be happier than to have you all here with us tonight in the Strangers Dining Room, and we hope that by the end of the evening you'll all be friends, not just with one another, but also friends with the Mulloon Institute as well. Tonight, I'd like to introduce a short film about the work of the Mulloon Institute that shares the story of our beginning and charts the remarkable expansion over the past few years since Stephanie mentioned the first memorial lecture almost 3 years ago. I think if our founder, Tony Coote, was here with us this evening, I have no doubt that he would be so proud of the way in which our dedicated team has risen to the challenge of meeting the incredible demand of landholders across the country to learn about landscape rehydration and begin projects to restore and repair their catchments. The Institute has grown in this time. We now have an office in Townsville in North Queensland, an office in Wagen in southwest Western Australia, and our Mulloon Rehydration Initiative, our cornerstone project, is celebrating its 7th year, showcasing what is possible to build resilient communities and to repair the environment. Thanks to Susanna Cowley and Nigel Christensen from Enviro Media for creating this film. I hope it inspires in you the same energy and drive of our small but growing team who remain committed and unstoppable in their passion for their important work. And we are delighted that they are here in the room with us tonight. Enjoy the film.
The work of the Institute really is to restore and rehydrate landscapes, bring back the processes that once operated in the Australian landscape that better manage surface and groundwater, and rebuild floodplains, rebuild catchments. We're working with communities to restore catchments at the landscape scale, and we're doing that with education, responding to the interest of landholders across the country, building their capacity and working with them to take action on the ground. The direct benefits of landscape rehydration are environmental, they're about rebuilding biodiversity, but they're also about agricultural productivity. So when you're rebuilding soil moisture, you're increasing productivity. Through increasing soil moisture, you're starting to rebuild soil health. When you're rebuilding soil health, when you're managing the land for soil health, then you're creating the conditions that can sequester carbon from the atmosphere and build soil carbon. Landscape rehydration at the catchment scale is a social process. It brings communities together. It empowers them to take action, to create change that makes their environment, that makes their futures safer, more resilient to climate change. We use the Mulloon Rehydration Initiative, the Mulloon Catchment Scale project as a model that we believe can be scaled up and rolled out across the country. We want to rehydrate the nation.
Where I'm working with about 23 landholders across 23,000 hectare Mulloon catchment, effectively to regenerate the catchment as a whole and rebuild its resilience and rehydrate the whole system as best we can. Well, the project really had its genesis back in 2005 with the original rehydration project that occurred just on Mulloon Creek Natural Farm's home farm. I think the Mulloon Rehydration Initiative has been quite groundbreaking because it is an example of genuine catchment scale landscape regeneration project, which is community owned and community driven. Not only that, it's a fully benchmarked. We're able to, in the long term, monitor the outcomes of the project from an environmental, an economic and a social perspective. Rehydration isn't just about rebuilding structures, rebuilding the creek itself. It's also about rebuilding the natural landscape function in the system, rebuilding the carbon levels in the soil, increasing the biomass in general, increasing the biodiversity, rebuilding habitats. We've essentially re-established a landscape that is resilient to extremes of drought and extremes of flood. For example, in 2020, we had a 1 in 50 year flood, biggest event since 1974. And for the first time since European settlement, the creek didn't erode, it actually aggraded. What drives me is the people that I work with, grassroots people, landholders, community members. They're just genuine people that want to do exactly what I want to do, and that's rebuild the Australian landscape. Our scientists aren't just kind of aloof. They interact with the landholders. The landholders are happy to have the instrumentation on their properties.
The Mulloon Institute, the Mulloon Creek, our community of landholders, they all are part of what is a living laboratory.
We're putting a lot of resources into making sure that not only have we got a good array and quantity of data, but it's also the quality of that data that we're getting. There's really not many projects in the world like this that are doing not only the range of monitoring and the scope of that monitoring. It is complex, but it's also about showing that we're invested in this for the long term.
The monitoring is actually showing, as we get more information, there's all positives. Production has improved, water quality's improved, water quantity's improved. Native flora and fauna and all those environmental co-benefits have significantly improved. The system is rebuilding here, which is quite phenomenal. The principles of what we do can be applied anywhere across Australia, in fact, globally. The more that we can understand, based on the monitoring, based on good scientific data and analysis, and that helps us have greater confidence of how we adapt this to other regions.
We try and build the capacity of landholders to identify how water is moving in their landscape. People are hungry for it. If you drive across this landscape, you'll see there's gullies, there's incisions, there's erosion, there's a water cycle that's quite broken. It's up to all of us to repair those areas, and there's huge community buy-in. We've got to have landholders being empowered through education to use their own observation and understanding and make good decisions to take country forward. So I think it's the primary focus for me for how we begin to rebuild, a functional, productive agricultural landscape in Australia. When I see a functioning agricultural landscape in terms of water cycle and carbon cycle and perennial plants that are vigorous and productive, and people are able to manage them for profit, it fills me with a lot of joy.
We have, over a couple of hundred years, degraded a lot of our catchments right across the country. The degradation that we have has effectively broken the water cycle. The water cycle is a key aspect of how our climate works. We're seeing microclimate changes in those areas that we are doing this sort of work, so we can have a substantial impact on the whole climate. As different community groups and land care groups contacted us to come and run workshops, we saw, well, we need a national rehydration initiative. We see the National Rehydration Initiative as a community-based initiative working with catchment communities, land care groups. Well, the problem we see in the catchments exist almost right across Australia. We see governments investing in roads and rails and dams. I think they've got to be investing in our natural infrastructure, because our natural infrastructure is the best way to work towards minimising some of the effects that these natural disasters have. Combined, it's an opportunity between corporate Australia, government and the communities. There's a massive opportunity to accelerate this work for everybody's benefit.
And in the driest inhabited continent on the planet, we've got to particularly rehydrate this system. If we're talking about degradation and desertification, while the reverse of that is rehydration and regeneration.
In 2021, with the release of the IPCC report and COP26, we saw the code red for the planet. We saw the international community coming together, acknowledging that we need to take action. For the future of our country, for our food and water security, it's important that we take this approach across the country, that we equip communities to take action, to rebuild and restore their landscapes.
Look, I think we want to inspire the change through example. The example of the Mulloon project, the example of the many other projects that are now actually coming to fruition throughout the country. The land and the water and the biodiversity, all of these natural resources are effectively our natural capital. They are the basis of the human economy. If we degrade those, then we degrade the human economy. It's as simple as that.
I think when we start to see many more catchments being repaired and rehydrated and made resilient to all of our extremes in various parts of Australia, history will talk very well about the role that Tony Coote and this little farm had in fixing up Australia's landscapes.
Wow, can't be unhappy with that film. That really tells our story. To Tony and Tony Coote's family and friends who've joined us tonight, thank you. Thank you for your ongoing support. The expansion of our work continues through meaningful collaborations with like-minded organisations sharing the values of the Institute. So tonight, I am delighted to announce a new foundational sponsor of the Mulloon Institute, Vitasoy Australia, an organisation that shares a common set of values and a commitment to sustainability that underpins this long-term partnership. At Mulloon, we believe this partnership will help us spread the word of the incredible opportunity that landscape rehydration projects offer Australia's environment, farming and society. Indeed, Vitasoy Australia, with their extensive consumer base, will help us shine a light on the amazing work of the Mulloon Institute and raise our profile across the country. Please join me in welcoming David Tyack, General Manager of Vitasoy Australia, to say a few words.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks, Gary. Special guests. Before I get into our connection with the Mulloon Institute, I might fill in a few blanks for those going, Vitasoy, what's that? So we have been working with Australian soy farmers, Australian almond farmers, Australian rice farmers, Australian oat farmers for over 20 years, taking their world-class crops, converting them to nutritious, great-tasting range of plant-based milks, made in Wodonga for over 20 years. Local produce, world-class rated produce converted in Australia. Part of it was also that at Vitasoy we believe that doing business in a marketplace is a privilege, it's not a right. And on our ESG, so our environmental journey, we recognise that we have an obligation to look at how we tread on the environment too. So how can we look to consume less, use less, and do our part in order to improve the environment at the end of our chapter 2. So how we tread lightly. So we've been on that journey for a while now, and part of it was trying to find a way that we could help a grassroots organisation with world-class recognition, connections with federal government agencies, local agencies and local governments, and help them in their pursuit of making this a better place too. So we conducted a national search, and the Mulloon Institute came up trumps. As you saw from the video, you can see why. So the work they do at a local level of rehydrating the nation spoke to us in great terms. And that's why tonight, in conjunction with Caroline and Gary, we're very pleased to announce a multi-year investments as a foundational sponsor of the Mulloon Institute for many years to come. And we're hopeful that with our part to play, we'll also bring our channel, our voice, our consumers along with the journey to and grow a bigger size of the Mulloon Institute in the Australian marketplace too. Thank you.
Dave, thank you very much indeed, and to Carolyn and Gary before you, thank you for your wonderful words. The Honourable Shane L. Stone, ACQC, has had a long career of serving his community, a quality he inherited from his parents, Les and Pam Stone, who both served as mayors in the Victorian border city of Wodonga. Primary school teacher, barrister, Member of Parliament and company director. Shane was elected to the Northern Territory Parliament in 1990 and served as the Territory's 5th Chief Minister. He retired undefeated from Parliament after 10 years. He served on boards across 3 continents. He has an extensive background with not-for-profits and charities, including as the National President of the Duke of Edinburgh Award, the Australian Children's Television Foundation, the Order of Australia Association and Dragon Boats Australia. Shane served over 40 years in the Reserve. He is the Chairman of the Order of Australia Council. In 2019, Prime Minister Scott Morrison requested Shane leave the private sector to lead the recovery effort from the 2019 North Queensland floods. Since then, he's also headed the government's drought response and now leads the National Recovery and Resilience Agency, or NRRA, which is responsible for recovery from natural disasters, including the recent floods, as well as driving ways to help prepare for future disasters. Tonight, Shane will speak to us on the importance of legacy. Would you please welcome the Honourable Shane Stone.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. I don't know whether I represent a treat, but I hope that I might prompt in you some reflections based on what I'm about to say. First, let me get through some acknowledgements that I do want to make. The Honourable Gary Nairn, AO, Chair of the Mulloon Institute. I've only had one glass of red. The Honourable Dougal Saunders, MP, New South Wales, Minister for Agriculture. My good friend and colleague Joe Buffoni, PSM, who is the Director General of Emergency Management Australia, which is in Home Affairs. Mrs Margie Alsop, sister of the late Tony Coote, AM, and your extended family who are here. Miss Nicole Overall, MP, member for Monaro, congratulations on your recent election, and I hope you take every opportunity to serve your community. Being elected to Parliament is a unique and enduring privilege. Not many Australians get to do it. To my old friend, the Honourable Michael Yabsley, former member of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly and Minister of the Crown, and most importantly, a co-resident at college in ANU over 40 years ago. What went on in college stays in college. And if Alan Murray, the chairman of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, was still here, I would say to him that my lot were in the tall ships, because I was direct descendant of a First Fleet convict, and it's only taken us 7 or 8 generations to become respectable. In a sense, if you consider being a Member of Parliament respectable. The CEO of Vitasoy, David Tyak, can I just say that outfits like this don't survive and work unless the private sector gets on board. So look, I really do congratulate Vitasoy on making that commitment. I want to acknowledge several of my colleagues from the National Recovery and Resilience Agency who are in Sydney for meetings with our colleagues at Resilience New South Wales in the aftermath of the catastrophic floods to sweep north and south coast of New South Wales. I also acknowledge board members of the Mulloon Institute, and finally 2 old friends of mine who I've not seen for many years, Mrs Gillian Story AM and Mr John Story, pastoralists from near Yass. Welcome. It was a bit like a step back in time. Dick Warburton walked past me when I was sitting down, and Dick Warburton, Mayo, LVO, he was very good at giving guidance to young aspiring ministers and heads of government. And Dick, I just wanted to say, it gives me an opportunity to say publicly, you are such an iconic Australian business identity that we hung off every word when you talked about training and apprenticeships and how important that was and the future of industry and some of your landmark work which was commissioned by various governments. Dick, you're an absolute legend and someone that I still remember very, very fondly. Dick Warburton. Thank you for the opportunity to deliver the Tony Coote Memorial Lecture this evening, showcasing the Mulloon Institute and its invaluable and transformational work that in the national reckoning will in time be seen as one of the most important initiatives in Australia's history. I don't say that lightly, transformational, because as a country we can't move forward unless we Australians rediscover what it is to embrace transformational projects and initiatives. So important. If you're expecting an address centred on climate, disasters, farming or agricultural strategies, then I'll probably disappoint. But rather I'll touch on those issues, but in the context of a truly outstanding individual, Tony Coote AM. What I want to speak to you about is what persuades a high net worth individual and his family to commit to such an enterprise far removed from their core business. Why do people engage in philanthropic activity to make Australia a better place? As the Chairman of the Order of Australia, I see many examples of people giving back to supporting worthy causes that impact our daily lives. The council that I chair goes through all the nominations, we make the recommendations to the Governor-General of the day. We Australians, we're a generous people, no doubt about that, and we prove it time and again in supporting worthy causes and projects. Our response to disasters is commendable, our broader support for the community and institutional causes greater still. I want to talk about giving back and the importance of legacy, something I feel strongly about and a passion I share with the namesake of this lecture. You can have all the baubles, wealth and social position, but what really matters is legacy and the reputation you leave behind. Legacy and reputation. I never met Tony Coote, but I've become aware of his vision, ideas, his plans for Australia. They are remarkable, in my view, understated in the broader Australian conversation. I wanted to know more about this man and his dreams, so I sought out some members of his family, and I'm grateful that his youngest daughter, Rebecca, responded to my invitation. I asked Rebecca, tell me about your dad. Help me understand and share with my fellow Australians his story and why. I'm grateful for her insight and assistance, and I hope my presentation tonight does justice to her recollections and her father's vision. Tony's and my background were different, but I think our values and our way of working would be similar. We would have had much to talk about. Tony was conferred a member of the Order of Australia in 1988 for services to industry and community. And as the chairman of the council, I do notice when I'm at functions and events, people walking past who bear the lapel pin of the Order of Australia. So I know that I'm in company with people who understand what I'm about to say. That was almost 25 years ago that he received his award, but he kept giving. And where he alive today, I'm confident a higher award would have been forthcoming. Recipients of the Order of Australia generally develop further service, and Tony was faithful to that call and expectation. As I said, as chairman of the Order of Australia Council, I read about and assess remarkable Australians who demonstrate what we should celebrate, nurture and encourage others to aspire to. These are people who go above and beyond the greater good of the nation. They are the glue that holds the community together. In Tony Coote, AM, we had a big bottle of Araldite, or Tarzan's grip if you prefer. I met with Rebecca to make sure I got a good sense of the man whose vision and propensity to challenge convention led to the establishment of the Mulloon Institute. Rebecca describes a father who was gentle, fun and thoughtful. She said he was a wonderful leader, someone who, because of his extensive business and board experience, was adept at bringing different parties to the table. He turned bold ideas into workable plans and plans into reality. From his base at Mulloon Creek Natural Farms near Mungadore, Tony brought sceptical farming neighbours on board right along the catchment area. Now the Mulloon Institute is having a national impact with their leaky weirs and land practices. Wherever I travel as Coordinator General, I encounter farming communities experimenting with regenerative practices of water, soil and vegetation management that create sustainable, resilient environments. Tony's goal was to prove that you could repair and nurture the land and still run a profitable farming enterprise. By all accounts, he wasn't opposed to wealth generation and profit. It's what you did with your wealth that clearly mattered to him. Natural disasters, farming practices, an ever-changing climate, all the dots are connected if you really think about it. Invariably, it falls to different levels of government to play a role protecting and nurturing our agricultural sector, safeguarding our fragile environment and supporting the sustainability of our food chains to the benefit of the wider community. We never want to be in the situation where we are a net importer of food. That said, the broader community has responsibility to play its part, and an organisation like the Mulloon Institute is front and centre in the conversation. In its example of individuals stepping up, you simply cannot expect the government to do everything. Arising from key recommendations from the Royal Commission into the Natural Disaster Arrangements, the Bushfire Royal Commission, as it was reported in the media, the organisation that I lead, the National Recovery and Resilience Agency, is the first ever enduring national agency responsible for supporting recovery from natural disasters, drought and other hazards. The NRRA has a specific responsibility around resilience and preparedness. Much of what we do can only be accomplished through collaboration. We work closely with our state and territory counterparts and with local government to support communities recovering from natural disasters. Our efforts are underpinned by the guiding principles of locally led, locally understood and locally implemented. Since the 2019 North Queensland flood, 154 disasters have been declared in 402 unique local government areas, with a total population of around 20.8 million. The scale of what I'm dealing with at times beggars belief. Think about that. Since 2019, I've had to deal with 154 disasters in this country. In New South Wales, agencies at state and federal level are in regular contact, harnessing our respective resources to work with communities as they continue to clean up and assess the damage from the terrible flooding of a few weeks ago. Local government remains critical to our efforts. To give you an idea of what people are dealing with, in Lismore over 900 homes have been rendered uninhabitable. Uninhabitable, no going back. The town's infrastructure has been trashed. The CBD is no more. This is a catastrophe at every level. In Queensland, we're working hand in glove with the Queensland Reconstruction Authority, and they face similar challenges. The reconstruction challenge is exacerbated by a shortage of building materials and skilled tradespeople. I completely understand that people want to get back into their homes and on with their lives, and it is going to take time, a long time. Much like the Black Summer bushfires, circumstances beyond our control will pose a significant hurdle. That said, such obstacles never deterred Tony Coote. While he respected convention, Tony was not afraid to do things differently. He was, by all accounts, open-minded and would ask the questions, what if and why not? He encouraged innovation. It didn't matter if something didn't work, but it mattered if you didn't at least give it a go. That's a very Australian trait, because we are a very innovative and creative people. Convention also needs to be tested when it comes to agriculture and, by extension, natural disasters. The Productivity Commission in 2014 estimated that we spend 97% of all disaster funding cleaning up and only 3% on getting ready, preparing. Now, this has improved marginally since 2014 over the past decade, but we need to do better. And if we don't do better, it's estimated that by the year 2050 we will be spending $90 billion a year, just patching the place up all the time, and that's not sustainable. We need to flip this and dial up the getting ready part. Being better prepared, we need to challenge the way we've always done things. Tony Coote was good at that. It underpinned his whole approach. I've dealt with every flood since North Queensland in 2019, and that doesn't include Catherine in 1998, when I was Chief Minister and the town disappeared beneath the Catherine River. I've been in flood-affected communities from the start to well after the waters have receded and others have moved on. I've seen too much heartache and devastation. Collective action is needed so that Australians are repeatedly facing the threatening situations where they lose everything but the clothes on their back. Science tells us that longer, hotter, drier summers and more extreme weather are here to stay. The current unprecedented events tell us we need to change how we respond and how we prepared. The unprecedented have become the new norm. There's no point talking about a 1,000-year flood if it comes again the next year. It misleads people into a false sense of security. These are unprecedented times. I suspect Tony Coote would have made a very good Coordinator General. He would have asked all the right questions and fearlessly prosecuted the outcome. This means not just building back, but building back better. There's no use restoring infrastructure like for like. When it comes to reconstruction, betterment should be the rule, not the exception. It means investing in ways that lessen the impact and severity of future natural disasters. We can't control weather, but we can look at ways to minimise the impacts through flood levees, cyclone shelters, early flood warning systems and the like. It means challenging planning decisions that allow homes to be built at high-risk areas without the right mitigating infrastructure and without mandating materials that are better suited to the conditions. It has been documented that Indigenous Australians warned Governors Phillip and Macquarie about the floodplains. They listened, but subsequently other generations have not. It means asking the difficult questions like, Should we build here? If not, what do we do to help people relocate and restart their lives? We have examples of where the tough questions asked and addressed have led to far less heartache in the longer term. Take some of the residents of Grantham in Queensland Lockyer Valley who took the opportunity to move to higher ground after the 2011 floods which claimed 11 lives. While the town was still impacted in these recent floods, those who chose to take what's known as the Grantham land swap were unaffected. Those who went back into their old homes were all flooded yet again. They didn't have to relive the trauma and heartache of 11 years ago. But that said, I respect the right of Australians to make their choices. We are not a country that forces people into moving or doing things that they don't want to do, or we shouldn't be. The challenge is how we collectively prepare ourselves for the next disaster while ensuring that we support those recovering from the last. I'm sure that Tony Coote would have engaged in such a conversation. Questioning convention led to the Mulloon Institute and the continuation of Tony's vision to protect and nurture the land. It has also made a significant contribution to disaster preparedness and damage minimisation. Tony was not from the land, as many of you know, but the land held his heart. He spent school holidays on friends' farms and the family property at Castle Hill. And while he went into the family business, he remained deeply connected to the land. He and his family purchased Mulloon Creek in the late 1960s, and Rebecca recalls the many visits where their day was planned from breakfast. He was a bit of an organiser, apparently. And at the completion of each task, the notebook and the pencil would come out of his top shirt pocket and he would start checking off who had done what. He shared his passion for the land with his children. There were walks in the bush where their father would make them sit still and listen to what was happening around them. Listening and paying attention to what's around you is critical in my work with the survivors of natural disasters. You don't need someone coming into their devastated homes, business and communities and talking at them. They need someone who will listen. You learn more from listening to than talking at people. It's important that I visit communities as soon as possible after a disaster, taking care not to get in the way of the first responders. I do this to understand the damage, talk to those on the front line of the response and recovery, and talk to the survivors, because that's what they are. They are survivors. If I know what's supporting their recovery and what's frustrating them, I can make sure that we all work together to make their lives a bit easier at what is stressful, challenging, and sometimes a very heartbreaking time. My trip into the Tweed, Byron Bay, Ballina and Lismore last week was in part harrowing and heartbreaking. I make these trips to understand the impact and to bring hope. I'm often told it means a great deal that someone in my role cares enough to show up and listen. I wouldn't mind a quid for every time someone has said to me, "You're the first person from Canberra in charge of something who turned up." That does a disservice to Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who's been front and centre in every disaster since I've been involved. I thought it remarkable that on his re-election about 3 years ago, he didn't fly off overseas for the usual lap of honour in Washington, Jakarta, Tokyo, London. He returned to flood-ravaged Cloncurry in North Queensland as he promised. And that meant so much to those people to see their Prime Minister come back. In a similar way, Tony Coote brought people from different perspectives and expertise, and together with farmers to look at ways to repair and nurture the land while at the same time earn an income from it. It takes a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve, the ability to harness different opinions and to broker consensus, and often a good dose of patience. Rebecca recalled one of her last visits with him when a bird flew into a window and fell to the ground. He picked it up and held it gently to his chest and waited for it to regain consciousness. He said it just needed time to recover. We all need time to recover from drought, natural disasters, farming practices which have been in the way of things, but with the benefit of hindsight have proven to be detrimental to the environment longer term. Sometimes progress feels frustratingly slow and from the outside appears to have stalled. There are many factors outside of our human control. We need to support recovery at a pace and in ways that are meaningful to the survivors. Just as Tony held the bird until it was ready to get back up, so must those charged with leading recovery hold individuals and communities until they are ready. The National Recovery and Resilience Agency brings a national lens to its work with communities on local-led recovery. This means we bring the lessons learned from supporting communities all around the country, draw on the expertise of some of the country's best and brightest scientists, make evidence-based decisions on where to focus efforts to reduce the impact of future natural disasters, and ask people, what do you believe is needed? I almost dashed from the lectern to get to the chamber.
It's only the upper house, don't worry.
Last bastion of feudalism. People need assurance that we're there at the beginning and we're staying for the long haul. The agency's recovery support officers, our eyes and ears on the ground, right across the country, are and will always be a critical part of our operation. We make sure no one is forgotten. Their efforts during the recent disaster season underscore the merits of having regionally based staff who live and work in the communities they support. As I reflected on early, Tony was appointed a member of the Order of Australia in 1988 for services to industry and community. The Order of Australia is not just a pat on the back, it's an acknowledgement that you have made a difference, that you have contributed over and above what might normally be expected of people in your role. You have gone that extra mile. I believe we don't encourage, reward or acknowledge people who go that extra mile enough. In 2020, 1/4 of Australians aged 15 years and over participated in unpaid voluntary work through an organisation, and this was down from 1/3 the year prior. And I'm delighted tonight to be sharing my table with members of New South Wales SES, who are among the first to be on the scene. In its 2016 report, The State of Volunteering in Australia, the country's peak body for volunteering reported that many organisations are struggling to get the volunteers they need. As Coordinator General, I see firsthand the positive contribution of volunteers and not-for-profits before, during and after natural disasters. If I may take one example, it was the North Queensland floods. From 25 January to 14 February 2019, regions of North Queensland experienced exceptionally heavy rainfall and major flooding, the result of an active monsoon trough and slowly moving waters across a low pressure system from Territory border to the Queensland coast, an area as large as the United Kingdom. The region hit new rainfall records. Floodwaters up to 700 kilometres long and 70 kilometres wide. They covered 15,000 square kilometres in the Flinders and Norman River basins. Some areas, including Townsville, exceeded... It's the bells. It's the bells for Parliament. Would you like to go? I understand.
Got about a minute left.
He says we've got a minute left. They're looking for Mark Latham, right? I saw him in the dining room. I just love it in politics when people reinvent themselves. It's all part of the rich fabric of democracy that we live in. Yeah. Are you sure we've only got a minute left?
Roughly.
Roughly.
Can you tap dance?
I'll pick it up again when it stops. Continue? Speak louder? Okay, I'll speak louder. I was talking about the Queensland North Queensland floods and the extent of that water and how it rains across that area. The personal toll was immeasurable. People lost livestock. We estimate 600,000 dead cattle, 50,000 sheep, 50,000 goats, and just about every fence in the area had been knocked over. Very, very challenging. But people got back into it and they got on with it. If you've got to imagine folks who the homestead's been washed off the stumps, the kids' ponies have drowned, their pets are gone, they've lost everything. And you turn up and you've got to put an arm around them and say, you've got to put your arm around people and give them a sense of hope. Our sponsorship of tonight's event and promotion of the Mulloon Institute in our agency communications recognises the vital work of Mulloon with land repair and rehydration and nature-based flood mitigation and drought preparedness. Much like the recent flood crisis across Queensland and New South Wales, the devastation of the 2019 and 2020 black summer bushfires across 5 states, and the Australian Capital Territory demanded government and non-government step up in ways not often witnessed. The collective response represents a compelling case of unified action to care for our families, friends and neighbours who've had the absolute worst thrust upon them. The collective efforts arising from various disasters encapsulate the sort of society I would like to think was the norm, not the exception, and the sort of society we must all seek to foster, and one that Tony Coote was committed to. As an aside, permit me the observation that in relation to the most recent devastation, before floodwaters receded in Queensland and as emergency continued to play out in New South Wales, the Morrison government responded. The first disaster payments were made in 24 hours. Don't believe the critics. It was the fastest federal response in history, and at a state level, it was a very commendable rollout of the first responders. And now for the record, over 1 million Australians have received emergency cash payments and income support, and over $1 billion has been paid out up until 20 March. And this is an important part of the hand-up response of government. Going back and offering a hand up to others goes to the heart of a great Australian society that visionaries like Tony Coote embraced. If we're going to tackle the massive problems of reducing the impact of more frequent and severe weather events, we need more great men and women who have both vision and passion and are not afraid of hard work or of challenging the status quo. Upon Tony's passing in 2018, Mulloon Institute Chairman Gary Nairn said, "The earth has lost a great man." The Australian community was the poorer for his passing, but his dream and legacy lives on. And the fact that you have come here tonight in support of that legacy bodes well for the future. In closing, I offer something for you to think about when you leave this evening and in the days, weeks and months ahead. The Mulloon Institute is Tony Coote's legacy. I ask the question, what will be yours? What will you leave behind? What will you commit to make this country that we all love a better place? I was talking to an old friend from Ukraine over here before, and I agreed I would say, Slava Ukraina, glory to Ukraine. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Stone, thank you so very much. That was indeed an absolute treat. Thank you for the tables at the back for hanging on during the racket. Clearly our Parliament is hard of hearing. Needs 4 minutes, really, Dougal? Wow. And then light on their feet as well, whoever's moving furniture later. But that was absolutely incredible. And you heard Mr Stone refer to Dick Warburton at the beginning of his address, and it's now my absolute pleasure to invite Matt Edgerton Warburton to give a vote of thanks. Matt is a partner in Gaydon's, a law firm, but acts as pro bono chair of the Mulloon Law Committee. Please make him very welcome indeed.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm here to give a vote of thanks for this evening. You might ask, what's a law partner doing with a group like the Mulloon Institute? Well, it started when my family decided to give the Mulloon Institute some money. I met Gary down at the homestead at Bungendore. And as Gary was talking about the process they were trying to do with Mulloon Institute, he was talking about all the problems that they were having in remediating catchments. And he was talking about the fact that when landholders and communities want to put in catchment remediation processes, they often need individual approvals for each structure. They need individual submissions for each separate landowner in a catchment. They need separate approvals from multiple government departments. They need to go to Department of Water, Department of Planning, Environment, Fisheries, etc. And often these approval process requires the need for expert reports, environmental impact assessments, development applications, site descriptions, hydraulic modelling reports, vegetation management plans, biodiversity assessment reports, etc. It's difficult to do. So Gary asked that I come on board and help. And what I've been doing is I set up the Mulloon Law Committee to speak to persons here in Parliament, and I've been doing that over the last couple of years. I've been doing it with the help of Dr. Jerry Bates. Jerry, do you mind putting your hand up? There we go, there's Dr. Jerry Bates. And an old mate of mine, Wilfred Finn, up the back there. So thanks Wilf. We've had a couple of victories. It's been a tough slog up at Parliament here, but we have been getting a lot of support from the Department of Planning and Minister Stokes and some of the persons within the department. And we're now beginning to see a little bit of fruit after a difficult period of time. So we've recently had an amendment to the infrastructure SEP coming through, which means that landholders no longer have to go to councils. They can go straight to the other departments. And the holy grail that we're shooting towards is a code compliance whereby landholders can just put these structures in their land without the need for approvals as long as it's code compliant. So we're in the middle of a process and it's difficult. So that's what we're doing at the Mulloon Law Committee. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm here to give thanks for a number of things. Firstly, I'd like to thank some of the hardworking people at the Mulloon Institute for putting this event together, especially Corinne Bryce and Kelly Thornburn, who I've been told have been working tremendously hard over the last couple of weeks. So thank you very much for all your hard work. Yes, if you could come up, please, that would be great. And while you're on your way up, I'd like to also thank Mulloon Institute now has 17 staff, and we need support. We're getting it from government grants, we're getting it from private donors, and thanks again to Vitasoy, Harris Farm, the NRRA, and the Lowe family for all their support and corporate sponsorship. I would like to thank the Mulloon board as well. As you know, the whole concept started with Peter Andrews, and it was Tony Coote and the Coote family that brought it to fruition at Mulloon. So we've got the idea and we've got the money, but now we need the stewardship. And at the moment we're getting some wonderful leadership from Gary Nairn and the board of Mulloon Institute. Peter Howarth and Charles Coote, thank you so much for all your hard work. And finally, to Shane, thank you so much for your time and effort this evening coming here, and you must be the busiest man in Australia, so thank you so much. You talked a lot about the importance of legacy, and for the Coote family and the Allsop family, we hope that you're proud of the legacy that your family has given us. And we hope that you're proud of what you're seeing here, and hopefully in 10, 15 years' time, we'll be 3 times as big or 10 times as big. So thanks very much. And Shane, you talked about the 3%. We are the 3% at the Mulloon Institute. So our job is to get landholders and land ready for droughts, get them ready for floods, get them ready for all these events, so that the land bounces back and continues to nurture, the families and the community around there. So thank you for your support. And finally, for your battling through both the parliamentary bells and what I thought were the Russians breaking through the Kiev front there, but just some fireworks. So I think that's it from me. Thanks everyone for coming this evening, and I hope you have a good night.
Matt, thank you so very much. Thanks to all of you for coming. I think Matt has literally thanked everyone that needs to be thanked. So we appreciate you being here, supporting the Mulloon Institute. In your program, you will see the MulloonInstitute.org if you want more information on how to support them further. Thank you for coming this year. We look forward, please no more COVID, to seeing you here again next year. Thank you so much. Have a great night.